Billionaire auto parts owner Graham Whitaker, 52, had spent his life giving orders until the night his housekeeper Monique Carter, 28, yanked him into the shadow beneath the marble staircase of his Santa Fe mansion. Her yellow cleaning glove pressed hard over his mouth, and her wide dark eyes didn't just warn him, they commanded him. In the grand foyer, unfamiliar male voices drifted closer, boots thudding on polished stone. Monique leaned in, whispering, "They can't know you're here." Graham felt something he hadn't tasted in years: helplessness. When the intruders finally left, Graham demanded answers. Monique's hands shook as she smoothed her uniform. "Not now," she pleaded. "It's dangerous for people I love." The next morning, she served coffee like nothing happened, but Graham couldn't ignore the fear behind her calm. Worse, he found documents in his office, slightly moved proof someone had been searching. Unable to rest, Graham hired a private investigator. The truth hit like a punch. Monique had shortened her name on her application, not to scam him, but to hide the nightmare chasing her younger brother Marcus Carter, buried under crushing loan shark debt. The men hadn't come for Graham's money. They'd come for her. Monique braced to be fired. Instead, Graham surprised even himself. "I'm not letting this destroy you," he said, voice low but steady. In that moment, the man who trusted no one chose something riskier than control trust, and it changed everything. Graham tried to go back to spreadsheets and quarterly reports, but the mansion felt different now, like the walls had learned to listen. Every creak of wood, every distant hum from the street made his pulse jump. Monique moved through the kitchen with her usual quiet precision, yet he caught at the slightest tremor in her fingers when she set down his cup, the way her eyes avoided his just a beat too long. By midday, the fear turned solid. Inside his home office, the safe was locked. Nothing stolen, but the folders were wrong. Shifted. Touched. Graham's stomach dropped, as if the floor had tilted beneath him. Someone had been searching, and they'd been close enough to breathe the same air as him. He stormed downstairs, finding Monique polishing the living room table, her shoulders tightening before he even spoke. "Monique," he said, forcing his voice low, "someone's been in my office." Her face drained of color. The cloth froze in her hand. For a second, she looked like she might run. Then she swallowed hard, standing perfectly still, like motion itself could invite disaster. I don't know anything about your documents, sir," she whispered. But the words came out too fast, too practiced. Graham stepped closer, anger and confusion colliding in his chest. "People don't break into my house for fun. My company, my life could be at risk. Tell me what's happening." Monique's eyes shimmered, and when she finally met his gaze, it wasn't defiance, it was protection. "Because if I talk," she breathed, "it could get someone I love hurt." That sentence cracked something in him. Graham had built an empire by trusting contracts, not hearts. Yet standing there watching her fight tears she refused to let fall, he realized the danger wasn't abstract anymore. It had a face, it had a name, and it was living under his roof. Graham didn't sleep that night. He lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the mansion breathe air vents, sighing pipes clicking, until every harmless sound started to feel like footsteps. By morning, his decision was already made. Even if it tasted bitter in his mouth, he called a private investigator, Ray Delgado, a man with tired eyes and a voice like gravel, and told him, "Find out who she really is." Quietly. 3 days later, Ray insisted they meet away from the house. Graham chose an office at one of his factories, where the steady clang of machinery could drown out guilt. Ray slid a folder across the desk. Graham's fingers hesitated before opening it, like touching the paper might burn. "Your housekeeper, Ray, said didn't lie about who she is, but she didn't tell the whole name. Monique Carter trimmed it down on purpose. She didn't want you digging." Graham felt his jaw tighten. He flipped through pages, references, old addresses, a grainy photo of Monique outside a modest apartment building, Her shoulders squared like she was bracing for impact. And this ray added, tapping one sheet is why. A name, Marcus Carter, her younger brother. A number circled in red, a debt swollen by brutal interest. Loan sharks, collectors, the kind of men who don't knock to be polite. Graham stared at the paperwork until the words blurred. His first instinct was anger at being deceived, at being pulled into someone else's mess. But then he saw Monique's face in his mind, the way she'd stood between him and danger without asking for anything. He closed the folder slowly, swallowing hard. So they weren't looking for my money, he said. They were hunting her. And for the first time, the threat stopped being a story and became a person he could no longer pretend was disposable. Graham drove home with the investigator's folder sitting on the passenger seat like a live wire. The mansion looked the same. Gates fountains, perfectly trimmed hedges, but inside the air felt thinner. In the kitchen, Monique Carter was stirring a pot, humming softly, as if the world hadn't cracked open. She turned when he entered, and the spoon paused mid-circle. Her shoulders rose like she'd been waiting for a verdict. Monique, Graham said, keeping his voice steady, I know about Marcus. I know about the debt. The color drained from her face so fast, it was like someone pulled a curtain. A plate slipped from her hands and shattered on the tile. Sharp, bright, unforgiving. She dropped to her knees immediately, grabbing at the broken pieces with shaking fingers, as if cleaning could erase what was coming. Don't, Graham murmured, stepping closer. You'll cut yourself. She froze, shards in her palm. Then she looked up, eyes wet, jaw clenched so hard her cheeks trembled. I didn't do it to trick you, she whispered. I shortened my name because if you checked, if you saw Marcus's mess, you wouldn't have hired me. Graham's throat tightened. And when those men came here, Monique swallowed tears, finally spilling. Because I knew you'd think I was dragging you into it. And you were the first person in years who treated me like I mattered, paid me on time, spoke to me like I was human. Her voice broke on the last word, like it hurt to say out loud. She set the glass down carefully, palms open in surrender. If you fire me, I understand. She inhaled, shaky and small. I just wanted one place to feel safe. Graham didn't answer right away. He just stood there listening to the tiny clicks of broken porcelain settling on the tile, watching Monique's hands hover over the shards like she was afraid to touch anything, afraid to make one more mistake. The easy move would have been to protect his name, his house, his business, to cut the risk out clean. Instead, he crouched down beside her. Look at me, he said quietly. Monique's eyes lifted, guarded and exhausted, like she'd been holding her breath for months. Graham reached for a dish towel, not her hands, and began gathering the sharp pieces himself. It was clumsy. He wasn't used to kneeling on a kitchen floor, wasn't used to cleaning up someone else's disaster. But he kept going piece by piece until her shaking slowed just a little. You're not being fired, he said. Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. I can't have dangerous men showing up here again, Graham continued, firm now. Not cruel, just clear. So we're going to fix this. Not by running, not by hiding. We do it the right way. Monique's throat worked as she swallowed back a sob. You don't understand, she whispered. They don't stop. They don't forgive. Graham nodded once, like he'd heard that kind of certainty in boardrooms and courtrooms alike. Then I won't ask you to face them alone. He paused, letting the words land. Bring Marcus here. I want to meet him. Monique flinched, fear flashing across her face, then something else, softer, almost painful hope. Why would you do that? She breathed. Graham stared at the towel full of broken pieces and realized the answer was simple. Because you dragged me into the dark to keep me alive, he said. Now it's my turn to step into it with you. Monique brought Marcus to the mansion just before sunset, like she was walking him into a courtroom. He stood in the doorway with his shoulders pulled tight thin and restless eyes flicking over the polished floors and high ceilings as if he didn't belong in any of it. A small tattoo peeked from his wrist. His hands stayed out where Graham could see them, empty, respectful, ashamed. "Mr. Whitaker," Marcus said, voice low, and held out his hand. Graham shook it, and felt something surprising. The grip was steady. Not the handshake of a predator, more like a kid trying to prove he still had dignity. Monique hovered a step behind him, arms folded over her chest, breathing shallow, watching Graham's face like her entire future lived in his expression. "Sit," Graham said, not as a command, but an offer. Marcus sat on the edge of the chair, knees bouncing once before he forced them still. "I'm sorry," he blurted, words tripping over each other. "I never meant for any of this to touch her. She's carried me since we were kids." Graham leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Tell me the truth. How did it start?" Marcus swallowed hard, eyes dropping to the rug. "A shop closed. 3 months' pay gone. Rent due. Somebody offered a quick loan. I didn't know what they were." His voice cracked on the last part, anger at himself, not anyone else. "It was 20 grand, now it's 4 times that. Every month it grows like a disease." Monique's eyes shone, but she didn't wipe them. She just stared at her brother, jaw trembling, love and exhaustion tangled together while Graham listened, realizing this wasn't just about money. It was about a family that had been bleeding quietly for years. Graham let the silence stretch until Marcus finally lifted his eyes, red-rimmed and raw. The young man looked like he'd been fighting a storm with bare hands, and losing. Monique stood behind him, fingers clenched so tight her knuckles went pale, as if holding herself together by force. "One question," Graham said, voice calm but heavy. "If I make this debt disappear, do you drag her back into hell again?" Marcus swallowed, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn wallet. He slid a faded photo onto the coffee table, 2 kids on a cracked front step. A teenage Monique, all sharp elbows and fierce eyes, gripping a smaller boy's hand like she could keep him from falling off the earth. "She was 13, Marcus whispered. "After our parents died, she promised she'd never leave me. She worked, she gave up school, she saved me, and I repaid her by putting a target on her back." His voice broke. "If you pay it, sir, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she never has to save me again." Graham stared at the photo a long moment, then pushed it gently back toward Marcus. When he finally spoke, his words landed like a door unlocking. "All right," he said. "I'll pay it, but we do this on terms that protect everyone." Monique's breath caught half sob, half prayer. Marcus Graham continued. "You're coming to work at my factory, fair wages, and every month a portion goes back to me until you've repaid what I cover. No excuses." He paused, eyes steady. "And both of you will stay here for now, under this roof, where no one can corner you in the dark." Monique's knees went soft. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trembling not from fear this time, but from the shock of being chosen. The mansion changed in ways Graham couldn't measure on any balance sheet. The first sign wasn't laughter. It was sound. Footsteps in the hallway at dawn. A kettle whistling a little too long because someone was actually awake to hear it. Marcus left every morning in a clean work shirt, shoulders straighter than the day he arrived, and came back on time like his life depended on that clock. Sometimes he did. Monique still moved with that quiet, careful competence, but the tightness in her face began to loosen like a fist slowly unclenching. One night, Graham walked past the kitchen and stopped cold. Marcus was teaching Monique a simple card game at the table, their heads bent close under the warm light. Monique laughed soft, surprised, like she hadn't given herself permission to do it in years. The sound hit Graham right in the ribs. This house used to swallow every noise and leave him alone with his thoughts. Now it held on to them, held on to people. "Can I join?" Graham asked from the doorway, the words coming out before he could rethink them. Monique looked up, eyes widening, then smiled. "Yes, sir. Of course." He sat at the kitchen table of all places and let Marcus deal the cards. Their conversation stayed small on purpose. A funny moment at the factory, a burnt batch of toast, the way the rain smelled on the stone patio. but beneath it ran something larger, steady as a heartbeat safety. For the first time in years, Graham ate dinner without a phone beside his plate. And when the night went quiet again, it wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that meant someone you care about is breathing in the next room. The knock came again, too sharp, too late, like the night itself was impatient. Graham checked the clock in his office, 9:57 p.m. The mansion was supposed to be asleep. He stepped into the hall and found Monique already near the front door, frozen with one hand hovering over the lock. Eyes wide, like she was listening for more than just a visitor. "Who is it?" Graham asked, keeping his voice low. Monique swallowed. I'm not expecting anyone." The doorbell rang a third time longer now, insisting. Graham moved in front of her without thinking, peering through the peephole. A young woman stood on the porch, under the porch light, hair damp mascara, streaked one small suitcase at her feet. And even before he opened the door, something in his chest knew. He swung it open. "Dad." The word hit him like a fist. Lila Whitaker's daughter, 26, stood there visibly pregnant, shoulders shaking, as she tried not to fall apart. He hadn't seen her in nearly 5 years, not since their last phone call ended in slammed words and silence that never got repaired. "I need help," she whispered. "I don't have anywhere else." Graham's mouth opened, but no sound came. Behind him, Monique's hand landed lightly on his arm, warm, steady grounding. "Let's bring her inside," Monique murmured, already turning toward the living room. "I'll make some tea." Lila glanced at Monique, startled by the gentleness in a stranger's face, and her breathing eased for the first time all night. Graham watched it happen, watched his daughter soften just an inch, and felt the truth settle heavy in his ribs. Money couldn't buy this moment. Only mercy could. "Come in," he finally said, voice breaking. "You're home." Lila's hands wrapped around the warm teacup, like it was the only solid thing left in her life. She sat on the edge of the sofa, suitcase still by her feet, eyes scanning the room as if she didn't deserve to touch anything in it. Graham lowered himself into the chair across from her, but the distance felt enormous, 5 years of pride sitting between them. "When are you due?" he asked, voice careful. 7 months. Lila whispered, one palm sliding over her belly like a shield. "And the father?" Her eyes dropped. "He left when he found out." A flash of rage lit Graham's chest, hot, immediate, but it burned into something worse when she kept talking. "I didn't come sooner because the last time we spoke, you told me I only called when I wanted money." Her throat tightened. "And now I'm here proving you right." Graham shut his eyes for half a second. The memory of that fight slamming back him, standing tall, words sharp, calling her irresponsible for choosing art over business school, saying things he'd rehearsed in anger and regretted in silence. Across the room, Monique stayed quiet, but she didn't leave. She set a small plate of cookies near Lila, then simply stood nearby like a guard who didn't need a weapon. I shouldn't have said that, Graham finally breathed. I was scared. Lila blinked, stunned, scared of what? "Of losing you," he admitted the words, scraping on the way out. "Your mother chased her own art once. I discouraged her hard. I thought I was protecting our family, but I was really protecting my control." His voice broke. "And I did it again to you." Lila's face crumpled. A quiet sob escaped. Graham crossed the space in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms, their first embrace in 5 years. "You're not a mistake," he murmured into her hair. "You're my daughter. And you're staying." The next morning, the mansion woke up like a different place. Not louder, just warmer, as if the air itself had softened overnight. Graham came downstairs early and found Monique already moving around the kitchen apron, tied sleeves rolled, cooking more than she ever did for him alone. Eggs, toast, sliced fruit, simple food, but made with the kind of care you feel in your chest. "You're making a feast," Graham tried to joke, but his voice still carried last night's ache. Monique didn't look up right away. "She's pregnant," she said gently. "She needs to eat." When Lila finally appeared around 9, she looked fragile, but cleaner, like sleep had stitched her back together a little. She paused in the doorway, uncertain, until Monique greeted her with an easy smile and pulled out a chair like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Sit," Monique said. "You're eating for 2. Lila's lips twitched, the smallest hint of relief. "That's a lot of food." "Good," Monique answered, placing the plate down with quiet authority. "That's the point." Graham watched his daughter relax in the space. Monique created, watched her shoulders drop, watched her take a real bite instead of picking at crumbs. And something twisted inside him, part gratitude, part guilt. His money could buy doctors and nurseries and safety. But it hadn't bought this a woman who could walk into a broken family and without asking questions start mending it with nothing but warmth and steady hands. Graham cleared his throat. "Lila, we need a plan." She nodded, eyes shining. "I know." "No," he said, leaning forward, voice firm in a new way. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. We'll get you proper medical care. We'll figure out what comes next. You're home, and I'm not letting pride take you from me twice." That afternoon, Graham watched Lila drift toward the back garden with a sketchbook tucked against her ribs like a secret. The winter sun sat low, turning the hedges gold, and for a moment she looked like the little girl he used to chase through sprinklers. Only now her steps were slower, careful around the weight of her belly. "You still paint?" he asked, keeping his tone light like he wasn't terrified of the answer. Lila's fingers tightened around the sketchbook. "I never stopped," she said, almost defensive. Then her voice dropped. "I just stopped believing it mattered." Monique appeared at the patio door, wiping her hands on a towel. "Show him," she said softly, as if she'd known Lila needed permission more than praise. Lila hesitated, then opened the book. Page after page. City streets at dusk. Old men playing chess in the park. A woman waiting at a bus stop with tired eyes that still held a spark. The lines were delicate, but fearless. Graham felt his throat close up. He wasn't looking at a hobby. He was looking at a piece of his daughter he'd tried to bargain away. "This is beautiful," Monique whispered first, like she was afraid to startle the moment. Graham reached out, not touching the paper, just hovering over it. "Lila, I was wrong," he said, the words scraping out of him. "I told you your dream was childish because I didn't understand it, because I was scared you'd get hurt." Lila's eyes filled fast. "I did get hurt," she said, voice shaking, "but not because of the art." Graham nodded, shame burning behind his eyes. "Then let me do one thing right," he said. "Let me see you. Let me support you. Not as an investor he swallowed hard as your dad." That night, Graham cleared the long dining table, something he hadn't done for anything but contracts, and watched Lila spread her paintings across the polished wood, like she was laying down pieces of her heart. Monique leaned in, close fingertips, hovering an inch above the canvas, careful not to smudge a single brush stroke. Marcus stood with his hands in his pockets, studying one portrait like it might teach him how to start over. "This one," Monique whispered, nodding at a street scene, rain on asphalt, a lone figure under a busted umbrella. "It feels real." Lila blinked hard, as if she wasn't used to kindness landing without strings. Graham swallowed the old instinct to critique rising and then dying. "We should show these," he said, surprising even himself. Marcus let out a short breath. "Like a real exhibit. Right here," Graham replied, glancing around the mansion like he was seeing it for the first time. "That front room nobody uses. We'll turn it into a gallery. People will come." Lila stared at him. "Dad, that's expensive. That's me making up for lost time." Graham cut in softer now. His gaze flicked to Monique, steady, warm, and he felt something in his chest shift, unfamiliar and frightening in the best way. A week later, invitations went out. The night of the show, the house filled with voices and music and the smell of food Monique insisted on cooking herself. Then, near 9, the front door opened and Graham went still. A woman in a green coat stepped inside. Older, elegant, carrying a small bouquet like a peace offering. Vanessa Hale, his ex-wife. Her eyes moved past him straight to Lila, then back to Graham. And when she noticed where his attention kept returning quietly, inevitably to Monique, her expression tightened with recognition. "Graham," she said gently, "you look at her like you've been starving for years." Vanessa's words didn't land like an accusation, they landed like a spotlight. Graham felt heat climb his neck as he watched Monique glide between guests, refilling glasses, steadying conversations, making people feel seen without ever asking to be seen herself. Monique wore a simple black dress, but it wasn't the dress that drew attention. It was the way she carried quiet strength, like someone who had survived storms and still knew how to offer warmth. Across the room, Lila stood beside her paintings, finally smiling without apologizing for it. Marcus hovered nearby, proud and protective in a new way. The mansion, once a museum of Graham's success, was suddenly alive, pulsing with voices, music, and second chances. Graham stepped outside for air chest tight. The old rules in his head started shouting, "She's your employee. People will talk. You'll ruin her life." But when he looked back through the window and saw Monique laugh softly, at something Lila said, saw how safe his daughter looked next to her, he realized the truth that hurt the most. Love had already entered his house. The only question was whether he would be brave enough to stop pretending it didn't belong there. He turned back toward the door, and for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about reputation. He was thinking about the cost of silence. Sometimes the biggest thing separating us from healing isn't money status or mistakes, it's pride. Pride tells you to protect your image. Love tells you to protect people. And if you're lucky, life sends you someone who proves that kindness can rebuild what ego destroyed. If this part hit you in the heart, tell me in the comments. Have you ever let pride cost you someone you loved? Or did you find a way back? And if you want more stories that feel like a movie but carry something real, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.